The Knights of the Cross by Henryk Sienkiewicz. Your comment can help others discover this channel. Chapter 17. The next day after their arrival at Bogdaniec, Mako and Zbyszko began to look around their old home. They soon realized that Zeke of Zgorzelec was right when he told them that at first they would be uncomfortable. With the farming they could get along quite well. There were several fields cultivated by the peasants whom the abbot had settled there. Formerly there had been much cultivated land in Bogdaniec, but after the battle at Plaus, where the family Grady perished, there was a scarcity of working hands, and after the invasion of the Germans from Slansk and after the war of Nałęcz with Krzyżacy, the formerly rich fields became overgrown with trees. Mako could not help it. In vain he tried for several years to bring farmers from Krzyżania and rent the land to them. They refused to come, preferring to remain on their own strips of land rather than to cultivate someone else's. His offer, however, attracted some shelterless men. In the different wars, he captured several slaves whom he married and settled in the houses, and in that way he populated the village. But it was hard work for him. Therefore, as soon as he had an opportunity, Mako pledged the whole of Bogdaniec, thinking that it would be easier for the powerful abbot to settle the land with peasants, and that the war would bring to him and to Zbyszko some people and money. In fact, the abbot was energetic. He had increased the working force of Bogdaniec with 5 peasant families. He increased the stock of cattle and horses. Then he built a barn, a stable, and a cow house. But as he did not live in Bogdaniec, he did not repair the house. Mako, who had hoped to find the Grodek surrounded with a ditch and hedge when he returned, found everything just as he had left it, with this difference only, that the walls were more crooked and seemed to be lower, because they had settled deeper in the earth. The house contained an enormous hall, 2 large rooms with alcoves, and a kitchen. In the rooms there were windows made of bladders, and in the center of each room there was a fireplace made of lime, and the smoke escaped through a hole in the ceiling. From the ceilings now blackened from smoke, during former times used to hang the hams of boars, bears, and deer, rumps of roes, sides of beef, and rolls of sausages. But now the hooks were empty, as well as the shelves fastened to the walls, on which they used to put the tin and earthen dishes. The walls beneath the shelves were no longer empty, however, because Zbyszko had ordered his servants to hang helmets, cuirasses, long swords, and short swords on them, and further along boar spears and forks, caparisons and saddles. The smoke blackened the weapons, and it was necessary to clean them very often. But Mako, who was careful, ordered the servants to put the costly clothes in the alcove in which his bed stood. In the front rooms there stood near the windows pine tables and benches of the same, on which the lords used to sit during the meals with all their servants. People accustomed to war were easily satisfied, but in Bogdaniec there was neither bread nor flour and no dishes. The peasants brought what they could. Mako expected that the neighbors, as was then customary, would help him, and he was not mistaken, at least as far as Zeke of Zgorzelec was concerned. The second day, when the old Laudika was sitting on a log in front of the house, delighted with the bright autumn day, Jagiełło came, riding a black horse. She dismounted and approached Mako, out of breath on account of fast riding, and rosy as an apple. She said, "May you be blessed. Tetulo sent me to inquire about your health." "I am no worse," answered Mako, "and at least I have slept in my own house. But you cannot be comfortable at all, and a sick person needs some care. We are hardened people. It is true that at first there was no comfort, but we were not hungry. We ordered an ox and 2 sheep killed, so there is plenty of meat. The women brought some flour and eggs. The worst is that we have no dishes. Well, I ordered my servants to load 2 wagons. On one there are 2 beds and dishes, and on the other different provisions. There are some cakes and flour, some salt pork and dried mushrooms. There is a barrel of beer and one of mead. In fact, a little of everything we had in the house." Mako, who was grateful for this kindness, caressed Jagiełło's head and said, "May God reward your father and you. When our housekeeping improves, we will return the provisions." "How clever you are. We are not like the Germans who take back what they give. Well, so much more may God reward you. Your father told us what a good housekeeper you are, and that you had taken care of Zgorzelicza the whole year? Yes. If you need anything else, send somebody, but send someone who will know what is needed, because a stupid servant never knows what he has been sent for. Here Jagiełło began to look round, and Mako, having noticed it, smiled and asked, "For whom are you looking?" "I am looking for no one." "I will send Zbyszko to thank you and your father. Do you like Zbyszko?" "I have not looked at him." "Then look at him now, because he is just coming." In fact, Zbyszko was coming from the stable. He was dressed in a reindeer jacket and round felt cap like those worn under the helmets. His hair was without a net, cut evenly over his eyebrows, and hung in golden curls on his shoulders. He walked swiftly, having noticed the girl. He was tall and graceful, looking like the shield-bearer of a rich nobleman. Jagiełło turned toward Mako, as if to show that she came only to see him, but Zbyszko welcomed her joyfully, and having taken hold of her hand, raised it to his mouth, notwithstanding her resistance. "Why do you kiss my hand?" asked she. "Am I a priest?" "Such is the custom. You must not resist." "Even if he had kissed both your hands," said Mako, "it would not be enough for all that you have brought us." "What have you brought?" asked Zbyszko, looking around the courtyard, but he did not see anything except the black horse tied to the post. "The wagons have not come yet, but they will soon be here," answered Jagiełło. Mako began to enumerate what she had brought, but when he mentioned the 2 beds, Zbyszko said, "I am satisfied to sleep on the Urus's skin, but I thank you because you thought about me also." "It was not I, it was Tatulo," answered the girl, blushing. "If you prefer to sleep on the skin, you can do it. I prefer to sleep on what I can. Sometimes after a battle, I slept with a dead Krzyżak instead of a pillow under my head." "You do not mean to tell me that you have ever killed a Krzyżak? I am sure you have not." Zbyszko, instead of answering, began to laugh, but Mako exclaimed, "For heaven's sake, girl, you do not know him yet. He has never done anything else but kill the Germans. He can fight with an axe, a spear, or with any weapon, and when he sees a German from afar, one must tie him with a rope, or else he will rush against him. In Krakow he wanted to kill the envoy, Liechtenstein, and for that he barely escaped execution. Such a man. I will tell you also about the 2 Freises, from whom we took their retinues and so much rich booty that one could redeem Bogdaniec with half of it." Here Mako began to tell about his duel with the Frisians, also about other adventures which had happened to them, and about the deeds they had performed, how they had fought from behind the walls and in the open fields, with the greatest knights living in foreign lands, how they had fought Germans, Frenchmen, Englishmen, and Burgundians. He also told her what they had seen. They had seen German castles of red brick, Lithuanian wooden grodse and churches, more beautiful than one could see around Bogdaniec, also large cities and the dreadful wilderness in which during the nights Lithuanian gods cried, and many different, marvelous things. And everywhere, in any fight, Zbyszko was victorious, so that even the greatest knights were astonished at him. Jagiełło, who was sitting on the log beside Mako, listened with open mouth to that narrative, tossing her head and looking at the young knight with increasing admiration and amazement. Finally, when Mako was through, she sighed and said, "I am sorry I was not born a boy." But Zbyszko, who during the narration had been looking at her attentively, evidently was thinking about something else, because he suddenly said, "What a beautiful girl you are now." Jagiełło answered, half in displeasure and half in sadness, "You have seen many more beautiful than I am." But Zbyszko could truly answer her that he had not seen many as pretty as she, because Jagiełło was beaming with health, youth, and strength. The old abbot used to say that she looked like a pine tree. Everything was beautiful in her, a slender figure, a broad bosom that looked as if it were cut out of marble, a red mouth, and intelligent blue eyes. She was also dressed with more care than when in the forest with the hunting party. Around her neck she had a necklace of red beads. She wore a fur jacket opened in front and covered with green cloth, a homespun skirt, and new boots. Even old Mako noticed this beautiful attire, and having looked at her for a moment asked, "Why are you dressed as if you were going to church?" But instead of answering, she exclaimed, "The wagons are coming!" In fact, the wagons now appeared, and she sprang toward them, followed by Zbyszko, The unloading lasted quite a long time, to the great satisfaction of Mako, who looked at everything and praised Jagiełło all the time. It was dusk when the girl started home. While she was getting ready to mount her horse, Zbyszko suddenly caught her, and before she was able to say a word, lifted her into the saddle. Then she blushed like the dawn, and turning her head toward him, said with emotion in her voice, "What a strong boy you are!" But he, not having noticed her confusion nor her blushes because it was dark, laughed and said, "Are you not afraid of wild beasts? It is night. There is a boar spear in the wagon. Give it to me." Zbyszko went to the wagon, took the boar spear, and handed it to Jagiełło. Then he said, "Be in good health. Be in good health," she answered. "May God reward you. Tomorrow or the day after I will be in Zgorzelec to thank Zyk and you for your kindness. Come, you will be welcome." Having touched her horse, she disappeared among the bushes growing on the sides of the road. Zbyszko returned to his uncle. "You must go inside." But Mako answered without moving from the log, "Hey, what a girl! She made the courtyard brighter." "That is true." There was a moment of silence. Mako seemed to be thinking about something while looking at the stars. Then he said, as if he were speaking to himself, "She is pretty and a good housekeeper, although she is not more than 15 years old." "Yes," answered Zbyszko. "Therefore old Zyk loves her dearly, and he said that the estate of Mochidoli will be her dowry, and there on the pastures is a herd of mares with many colts. Are there not a great many marshes in the Mochidlowski estate?" "Yes, but in those marshes there are plenty of beavers." There was silence again. Mako looked intently at Zbyszko for a while, and finally he asked, "About what are you thinking?" "Seeing Jagiełło reminded me of Danusia, and something pricked me in the heart." "Let us go into the house," answered the old Lodika. "It is getting late." Having risen with difficulty, he leaned on Zbyszko, who conducted him to the alcove. The next day Zbyszko went to Zgorzelec because Mako urged him. He also insisted that he take 2 servants with him for ostentation, and that he dress in his best clothes, to show respect and gratitude to Zyk. Zbyszko did as he was asked and went attired as if for a wedding, in his yaka made of white satin, bordered with gold fringe and embroidered with gold griffins. Zyk received him with open arms, with joy and with singing. As for Jagiełło, when she entered, she stopped as if she were rooted to the ground and almost dropped the bucket of wine which she was carrying. She thought that a son of some king had arrived. She became timid and sat silently, rubbing her eyes from time to time as if she would like to awaken from a dream. The inexperienced Zbyszko thought that, for some reason unknown to him, she did not wish to talk to him. Therefore he conversed only with Zyk, praising his munificence and admiring the house at Zgorzelec, which in fact was quite different from that in Bogdaniec. Everywhere comfort and wealth were evident. In the rooms there were windows with panes made of horn, cut in thin slices and polished so that it was as transparent as glass. Instead of fireplaces in the center, there were large chimneys in the corners. The floors were made of larch tree planks, while on the walls were hung suits of armor and many polished dishes, also silver spoons. Here and there were costly rugs brought from the wars. Under the tables there were enormous urus skins. Zyk showed his riches willingly, saying that it was Jagiełło's household. He conducted Zbyszko to the alcove, fragrant with rosin and peppermint, in which were hanging from the ceiling large bunches of wolf skins, fox skins, beaver skins, and marten skins. He showed to him the provisions of cheese, honey, wax, barrels of flour, pails of dried bread, hemp, and dried mushrooms. Then he went with him to the granaries, barns, stables, cowhouses, and to the sheds filled with plenty of hunting implements and nets. Zbyszko was so dazzled by all this wealth that during supper he could not refrain from admiration. "What a pleasure to live in Zgorzelec!" exclaimed he. "In Mochidoli there is almost the same wealth," answered Zyk. "Do you remember Mochidoli? It is not far from Bogdaniec. Formerly our forefathers quarreled about the boundaries and challenged each other, but I shall not quarrel." Here he filled Zbyszko's goblet with mead and said, "Perhaps you would like to sing?" "No," answered Zbyszko, "but I shall listen to you with pleasure." "Zgorzelec will belong to the young bears." "What do you mean by young bears?" "Why, Jagiełło's brothers. Hey, they will not have to suck their paws during the winter." "No, but Jagiełło will also have plenty in Mochidoli." That is true. Why don't you eat and drink? Jagiełło, pour for him and for me. I am drinking and eating as much as I can. Ungird your belt, then you will be able to eat and drink more. What a beautiful girdle you have. You must have taken rich booty in Lithuania. We cannot complain, answered Zbyszko, gladly seizing the opportunity to explain that the heirs of Bogdaniec were no longer Lodikas. A part of our booty we sold in Krakow and received 40 silver grzyvians for it. You don't say so. Why, one can buy an estate for that. Yes, there was one Milanese armor which my uncle, expecting to die, sold for a good price. I know. Well, it is worthwhile to go to Lithuania. I wanted to go there also, but I was afraid. Of what? Of the Knights of the Cross? Age, who would be afraid of Germans? I was afraid of those heathenish gods or devils. It seems there are plenty of them in the woods. They do not have any other place for shelter because their temples have been burned. Formerly they were well-to-do, but now they live on mushrooms and ants. Did you see them? No, I did not see any myself, but I heard of people who had seen them. Sometimes one of them sticks out a hairy paw from behind a tree and shakes it, begging for something. Mako told me the same, answered Jagiełło. Yes, he told me about it on the road, said Zyk. Well, no wonder. In our country also, although it has been a Christian country for a long time, one can hear laughter in the marshes, and although the priests scold about it in the churches, it is always good policy to put a dish filled with something to eat for the little devils. Otherwise they will scratch on the walls so much that one can hardly sleep. Jagiełło, my dearest, put a dish at the threshold. Jagiełło took an earthen porringer full of noodles and cheese and placed it at the threshold. Zyk said, The priests scold, but the Lord Jesus will not be angry about a dish of noodles, and a God, as soon as his hunger is satisfied, will protect one from fire and from thieves. Then he turned to Zbyszko. But will you not ungird yourself and sing a little? You had better sing, or perhaps Pana Jagiełło will sing. We will sing by turns, exclaimed Zyk. We have a servant who will accompany us on a wooden fife. Call the boy. They called the servant, who sat down on the bench and put the fife to his mouth, waiting to learn whom he was to accompany. None of them wanted to be first. Finally, Zyk told Jagiełło to begin. Therefore, Jagiełło, although bashful because Zbyszko was present, rose from the bench and, having put her hands under her apron, began. If I only could get the wings like a birdie, I would fly quickly to my dearest Jasiek. Zbyszko opened his eyes wide. Then he jumped up and shouted, Where did you learn that song? Jagiełło looked at him astonished. Everybody sings that. What is the matter with you? Zyk, thinking that Zbyszko was a little intoxicated, turned his jovial face toward him and said, Ungird, it will relieve you. But Zbyszko stood for a while with astonishment on his face. Then, having recovered from his emotion, said to Jagiełło, Excuse me, I suddenly remembered something. Sing further. Perhaps it makes you sad? EJ, not at all, he answered with a quivering voice. I could listen to it the whole night. Then he sat down, covered his face with his hand, and listened. Jagiełło sang another couplet, but when she finished she noticed a big tear rolling down Zbyszko's fingers. Then she sat down beside him and began to touch him with her elbow. What is the matter with you? I do not want to make you cry. Tell me what is the matter with you. Nothing, nothing, answered Zbyszko, sighing. I could tell you much, but it is over. I feel merry now. Perhaps you would like to have some sweet wine? Good girl, exclaimed Zyk. Call him Zbyszko and you call her Jagiełło. You have known each other since you were children. Then he turned toward his daughter. Do not mind because he struck you when you were children. He will not do it now. I will not, answered Zbyszko mirthfully. If she wishes, she may beat me now for it. Then Jagiełło, wishing to cheer him up, began to play that she was striking him with her little fist. Give us some wine, shouted the merry Pan of Zgorzelce. Jagiełło sprang to the closet and brought out a jug of wine, 2 beautiful silver goblets, engraved by a silversmith of Wrocław, and a couple of cheese. Zyk, being a little intoxicated, began to hug the jug and said to it as if he were talking to his daughter, Oi, my dear girl, what shall I do, poor man, when they take you from Zgorzelce? What shall I do? And you must give her up soon, said Zbyszko. Zyk began to laugh. Chai, the girl is only 15, but she is already fond of boys. When she sees one of them, she begins immediately to rub knee with knee. Tatushu, if you don't stop, I will leave you, said Jagiełło. Don't go, it's better with you here. Then he continued to say to Zbyszko, 2 of them visit us. One of them is young Wilk, the son of old Wilk of Bizazowa. The other is Chtan of Rogo. If they meet you here, they will gnash their teeth as they do at each other. Oh ah, said Zbyszko. Then he turned to Jagiełło and asked, which do you prefer? Neither of them. Wilk is a great boy, said Zyk. Let him go in another direction. And Chtan? Jagiełło began to laugh. Chtan, said she, turning towards Zbyszko. He has hair on his face like a goat. One can hardly see his eyes, and he has as much grease on him as a bear. Zbyszko now touched his head with his hand as if he had just remembered something important, and said, I must ask you for one thing more. Have you any bear's grease? I want to use it for medicine for my uncle, and I could not find any in Bogdaniec. We used to have some, answered Jagiełło, but the boys have used some to grease their bows, and the dogs have eaten the rest. Is there none left? Not a bit. Well then, I must find some in the forest. Have a hunting party for bears. There are plenty of them, and if you want some hunting implements, we will lend you some. I cannot wait. I will go some night to a barsi. Take a few men with you. No, I shall not do that, for they will frighten the beast. But you will take a crossbow. What can I do with a crossbow during the night? There is no moon now. I will take a fork and a strong axe, and I will go alone tomorrow. Jagiełło was silent for a while, but great uneasiness was reflected on her face. Last year, said she, the huntsman Bezduk was killed by a bear. It is dangerous, because as soon as the bear sees a man near the barsi, he immediately stands up on his hind feet. If he ran away, I could not get him, answered Zbyszko. At that moment, Zik, who had been dozing, suddenly awakened and began to sing. Thou Kuba, of toil, I Maciek of pleasure, go then in the morning with the yoke in the field, while I amuse myself with Kasia. Then he said to Zbyszko, You know, there are 2 of them, Wilk of Brzozowa and Chtan of Rogov, and you. But Jagiełło, being afraid that Zyk would say too much, swiftly approached Zbyszko and began to inquire, When are you going? Tomorrow? Tomorrow after sunset. And to which Bartsie? To ours in Bogdaniec, not far from your boundaries, near the marshes of Radzikov. They tell me it is very easy to get a bear there.
Remember to subscribe.